This is a really important interview that we're about to do because with us now in the studio is Professor Joanna Moncrieff, and a new study shows there is no clear evidence that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in your brain.
Yeah, and this is absolutely landmark because for years people have been told that it's due to a lack of serotonin. We could speak now to Professor Joanna Moncrieff. She joins us in the studio. She's a professor of psychiatry at the University College of London, and you were behind this author.
You're the lead,
behind
author.
This research.
You're
yeah, the lead author.
author.
This seems to me like a landmark set of results, that this could be a total game changer in the way that we tackle depression in this country.
So there's been an idea around for a long time that actually the evidence about serotonin doesn't stack up, that there are studies out there that are negative or inconclusive, but no one before has got all the research together and looked at it in total and found that not one single area of research on serotonin, at least the main areas, really provides any convincing evidence that depression is associated with low serotonin levels.
But then what is depression associated? What causes it? And I mean, we're talking about a debilitating condition, and we're going to come to you listening and you watching about this because you're telling us your stories. And I do also want to say we will give you a phone number for help if you are really, really down. But so what is causing the problem?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Of course, there's research going on into lots of other possible biological causes and has been for decades, but none of them have come up with any more convincing evidence than the evidence on serotonin. The evidence on serotonin is one of the areas that's been most thoroughly researched over the last few decades. So my interpretation of this research is that we need to look at depression differently. We need to stop seeing it as a brain disorder and start understanding it as an emotional reaction to people's circumstances.
Right.
Go on.
The stronger people or weaker people understand that is popping a pill the answer. Because if you're, throwing all our assumptions about this up in the air, where do we stand on antidepressant tablets?
So antidepressants were... The justification for using antidepressants, particularly the new type, the SSRIs that were introduced in the 1990s.
And does that stand for serotonin?
That stands for serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Okay.
And they were a new class that were introduced in the 1990s. And the justification for their use was the idea that they would boost serotonin levels by blocking the transporter protein that takes the serotonin out of the synapse and basically deactivates it. And so this paper is showing that if there's no association between depression and serotonin, that justification for using antidepressants isn't there. In other words, we really don't have evidence that they are rectifying an underlying abnormality.
But Professor, you know as well as I know that people will look for a crutch, they will look for a mask, something to just put a buffer between them and what they're going through. And if a tablet is now not going to do that, where do they go? What do they do?
So I think that's a really good question. And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. I think, depression is different in everyone that has it. And that's because the causes of depression are different in everyone that has it. And the first thing is to tackle the causes, is to address why someone is depressed. And there are lots of things about modern society that make people susceptible to depression. We live in very stressful times, huge cost of living crisis, so many people in debt, loneliness rife. So those are some of the main things.
Watching the news and think the world's coming to an end.
Professor Moncrieff, what I want to know is, OK, the cause may not be a lack of serotonin, but if antidepressant pills make people feel better, is it still problematic for them to continue to take them? Or are you suggesting that overnight everybody needs to come off these? Because that in itself carries heavy risks.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think it's a very important message to get across to people that people shouldn't stop these tablets suddenly. If they do decide they want to try and come off them, that should be done slowly and gradually and with support. So that's very important to say. But the research on antidepressants actually shows they are only marginally better than a placebo tablet. So an awful lot of the effect of the antidepressant is the hope that people get from taking a tablet. And that is an important message in itself, that actually giving people hope and support, letting people know that other people care and are trying to help them, that in itself is helpful. The other way that I think antidepressants sometimes work is that they can block or blunt people's emotions. And they do that across the board. That's not just an effect on depression, that's an effect on positive emotions too. And so when people are in a really, really bad place, maybe that can take the edge off those bad feelings, but it has negative consequences too.
Yeah, totally get that, and that's an interesting way of looking at everything again. But I can imagine someone sitting in a doctor's surgery and the doctor saying to them, well, actually, a tablet's not the answer. Here's what you've got to go and do. I mean, I think that would break a lot of people. I mean, it's like saying people who are in pain and doctors saying to them, oh, we don't want you on those tablets. Well, I'm telling you, you would eat grass, you would do anything. You would eat a handbag, if it killed pain for you, if you suffer from chronic pain. If you suffer from chronic depression, that's what I'm worried about, because in terms of, I don't know how you would call it, the aftercare or counselling or whatever, the resources, they're like wafer thin. There's nothing there.
They're better than they were. We do have counselling services, but there's still and therapy services, but there's still a wait for most people, and that is difficult. I think the point is, though, that from the scientific point of view, we have to be sure that our treatments are effective and that they're doing more good than harm.
I get you.
And the worry is that if antidepressants aren't doing what we thought they were doing, are they really doing more good than harm? What are they doing to the brain? And might that be harmful?
Yeah, look, we're so lucky to have you in here talking to us about this today. Your research being reported in all of the papers this morning, and as we say, an absolute game changer, all that you've done. But I want to ask you, away from the research, just an overview of psychiatry in your career. We talk about the societal problems being a huge cause for the depression that we're seeing today. Have you noticed a significant increase during your career of people suffering from depression? And do you think this is something that's going to get worse?
I don't know. I couldn't sort of scientifically say whether there's been an increase or not, but I would say that there is a huge amount of suffering out there which is related to the difficulties people are having with everyday life. Working in general practice or in a service that takes referrals from general practice, that there is a tidal wave of misery out there. There really is. Of people just struggling to get through their
Let me
lives.
just talk about some of the people struggling. Sarah says mental health is real, depression is real, suicide is real. Always check up on people you love. These types of discussions need to happen more.
Can I read out that number for Samaritans just straight away after you've read that one, because we know suicide is a huge problem when it comes to depression. The telephone number, if you do need somebody to speak to, and you can contact them 24 hours a day, to speak to somebody for free, 365 days a year, the number is 116123. We'll give you that number again in just a moment, but I just think because of Sarah's comments, they're really worth mentioning it. Ozzy has got in touch. Depression isn't always at 3 a.m. Sometimes it hits you at 3 p.m. when you're with your friends and you're halfway through a laugh. And it's so true, isn't it? This is something that it doesn't discriminate where you are or who you are.
Taz says, as someone who suffers from mental health issues, it really makes me sad when I think about all the times my depression or anxiety made me a bad friend. But these things are really hard to open up about. And we just thank people like the professor doing what she's doing. But I leave you in the last words I want to leave you with, and it is really speaking to these people directly, people who suffer this epidemic there is of depression. If you're not going to give them the tablets, if you're not going to give them the pills, if you're saying to them, well, actually, you can take them, but they're not really helping you, what would you say to those people going through this, which would give them some sort of hope, some sort of light at the end of the tunnel?
What I would say is that people come out of depression. It may take a while and it may take a lot of support, but people do come through it.
I know someone who didn't come out.
No, you're right. So, some people, really sadly take their own lives. But what I was trying to say is depression is something that comes to an end. And if people can get through it, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Even people with really severe depression. I was talking to a doctor last night in an educational session who'd had really severe depression for many years, but had got over it. And what she said had helped her was understanding both what had made her vulnerable, what it had been about her childhood that had made her vulnerable, what the circumstances were that had brought it on in the first place, and learning to live with really difficult and unpleasant emotions, which took her a long time, but which she did manage to do in the end.
Do you hold any value in CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, and how that can be a sort of help for people?
Certainly, for some people, maybe it doesn't work for everyone, but I think as a way of trying to understand how you've got to where you are and how to manage your mood, it can be really useful.
Professor, I would love to talk to you again. It's been an honour having you here. Good luck with the work that you do and continue down that path. You've been listening and watching Professor Joanna Moncrieff. She was the lead study of the author you will see in all the papers today. She's a professor of psychiatry at University College London. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Very much indeed.
Thank
And just
you.
a reminder of that telephone number once again, if you do want to get in touch with the Samaritans, if at home you're watching this and you're feeling bleak, there is help available. And as the professor was saying, there is support out there and you can come out of depression. That contact, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, is 116 123 on the bottom of your screen there. Do reach out, do ask for help.